Good morning again. We started the session yesterday morning with Shona's question of how long we are all committed to this stuff that we're doing here, how long we are working in renewables. And I think I thought back, and I think I started in 1990. And that made me think about what happened in the year 1990, where were we in the year 1990? And especially from my perspective, coming from Germany, I think the renewable energy share was at 2%, whereas it is at 25 or more than beyond 25% today. But also CO2, global CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere were at 350, whereas we have now just met the 400 parts per million benchmark. Only in 1990, imagine. Something else happened in 1990. I was a young tourist and I came to Canada, and I decided to, with a friend of mine, to canoe in the Yukon. So we rented a canoe and we went down from Whitehorse to Dawson City. And then when I was thinking about it, I thought, how did I actually, we were 3 weeks in the outback, how did I actually charge my mobile phone? And then, wait a minute, no, there were no mobile phones in 1990. No tablets. Very few of us had their own personal PC. There was no Google, no Facebook, and no Twitter. And now see where we are now and today. So I think we can learn a great deal from what happened in the ICT and the communication and the IT sector. And it's amazing to see how quickly things have changed in the last 25 years. And I think we see similar things in the renewable energy transformation. It is irreversible. We've heard this. We have really invested big scale in renewables at the moment. However, the challenges related to the transformation of the energy sector are slightly bigger than in the mobile phone or the IT sector. And the resistance and the addiction to certain resources is bigger than it was in the renewable energy, than it was in the communication sector. A good image that describes the level of transformation that we've reached already is a little story that I brought to you from my day-to-day life in Hamburg. I'm bringing my kids to the kindergarten, and you always have this big board, and you have little sketches. And the sketches today look slightly different than the sketches like 20 years ago or so. Because when kids are drawing houses, they all look very similar. They have a chimney, 2 windows, a door, and a rooftop. But now, would you believe it? There are a few sketches, a few drawings that have a wind turbine in the backyard. Or that have, depending on the perspective of the house, that have solar panels on the rooftop. And behind this very ordinary thing is, of course, a massive transformation that is going on at the moment. And this is what we will be talking about in this panel here. I always see these 5 parts of a gear wheel that really drive this transformation. And it's the local economy and jobs, it's education and capacity building, it's finance, unlocking funding for it, it's policy, the policy environment, and last but not least, it's reframing our cognitive default. It's about communication, right? So some of the subjects that I've just raised will be adopted or will be discussed here. We will be talking about the question of resilience and adaptation strategies. We will be touching upon ideas like climate bonds, and we will be also hearing about the policy and the policy environment. Maybe we will lose a word about Paris. And we will also hear about campaigning and communicating the renewable energy transformation. So without further ado, I come to our first speaker, who is the Executive Director on Adaptation to Climate Change team of the Adaptation and Climate Change team at the Simon Fraser University. She has gained national recognition as a resource for those seeking information on climate change and adaptation and practical coping strategy. And she also directs and produces the ACTS policy recommendation from the Simon Fraser University. So please, a warm applause for Deborah Harford.
To my esteemed colleagues here for being here, and very excited to be on this panel on the last day of this very inspiring leadership conference that's gaining a lot of attention across Canada, and I think outside Canada too. So congratulations to everyone involved, and thanks to everyone for being here today. I'm going to be talking about a concept of resilience to climate change. I work on climate change impacts and the principal things that we're going to have to work on to respond to those impacts. So obviously one of the drivers for the development of renewables is climate change. We know that we're committed to climate changes now due to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, at least to mid-century, whatever we do, even if we reduced emissions to zero today, which we know isn't going to happen. So climate change is basically causing crazy weather, and it's breaking records all the time, including records for the number of people talking about the weather. And that includes me today. So starting with temperature, I'm going to talk about two major climate change impact areas, temperature and flooding, both of which have implications for renewables development and operation. So in Australia in 2013, there was the temperature reached 52 to 54 degrees. And they had to create a new color for their temperature maps, which they used a deep purple for that. So that was an example of an extreme that is now a new record. Now, the purple that you see on this graphic is actually extreme cold. And it's important to realize that climate change is causing extremes in both directions. So when you get Senator Inhofe capering about with a snowball in the Senate, it doesn't mean climate change isn't happening, Senator, thank you. What was unfortunate about this cold snap, as you can see, is that it was located in the eastern US, and that's where lots of Republicans live. Oops, I'm not supposed to be getting political. So, interestingly, this is also a purple color, and you'll see that the extreme cold is purple, but if you look above it, you'll see the temperature anomaly going on in the Arctic. And Dr. Jennifer Francis of Rutgers University has posited that the melting Arctic is lowering the temperature differential between the equator and the Arctic, and that's having an effect on the speed of the jet stream, which carries the weather around the globe. It's slowing it down, and it's making it meander in large loops. And what that's doing is it's bringing extreme weather, and in this case it was cold weather, to places where it may not normally occur. And it's also making them stay there for longer than they normally would. So this is also combined with another aspect of climate change, which is what we call which is known as the Clausius-Clapeyron relation, which is a physics formula that was discovered in the mid-1800s, which shows that for every degree of warming, the atmosphere can hold about 7% more moisture due to evapotranspiration. So that is showing up as well, quite visibly. Over the last century in Canada, flood has been the greatest cause of disaster. Now you see insurance industry trends which show clearly that these flood events are increasing in severity, duration, and magnitude. And one out of every $2 now paid out by the insurance industry in Canada is paid out on flooding. So it's extremely significant damage, and it's a very expensive one. So you've seen this in extreme weather events such as the Calgary and Toronto flooding, also in 2013, perhaps not coincidentally, in the summer. So these higher temperatures are showing up, and so here you've got projected changes in annual precipitation on the left and summer precipitation on the right. So what we're seeing is a general trend towards warmer, wetter winters, and in fact, in some places, more precipitation overall. But in the summers, we're getting less rain and longer, hotter, drier periods. This is having a big effect on our hydrologic systems, as you can imagine. So we're seeing a shift in the patterns of our rainfall, which is affecting our rivers and their operation, and obviously the kind of rainfall patterns that everybody relies on for everything from irrigation to municipal water supplies. But it has a very important effect for renewable energy because it means there's less snowpack. And less water is falling as snow, more is falling as rain. It's running off. We're not able to store it as well. And we used to have this fantastic natural help from nature in which basically nature stored the water for us. And as the summer got hot and temperatures rose, we got this fantastic runoff, which we could use both for energy and irrigation and everything else. Unfortunately, now we've got, as I say, warmer, wetter winters and long, hot summers. This also coincides with a shift in the demand for energy. So because the winters will be warmer and the summers will be hotter, we're going to see a shift in electricity demand from winter to a much greater need for cooling in the summer. So the issues for renewables include everything from interruption of service, problems creating power through hydro, for instance, and also we've got another wild card in the climate change pact, which is sea level rise. And here you can see in the United States how many energy facilities are at risk, along with how much population. So renewables add to resilience. They add to communities being able to survive climate change impacts because they decentralize the grid. When you've got local sources of energy that are coming from things like solar, you don't have to worry if the major grid, the centralized grid, gets knocked out. However, we do have to worry about ecosystems. We're doing all this to help ecosystems, basically, because they are what all life depends on. So we have to be very careful about the impacts of renewables on ecosystems, especially solar. Rare earth mining, production of materials through coal-fired energy, ironically, which may be what is being used to create solar panels. In China, where a lot of solar panels are being manufactured right now, there's a lot of toxic dumping into water supplies. We don't have a good recycling stream set up. We don't have a lot of accountability for these companies. And we also have to think about land use, because land use is exactly what is challenging our systems on top of climate change. We have massive human encroachment and material extraction. So population is going to grow to 10 billion people. Look at the smartphones in the room. Now imagine that many solar panels. What are we going to do with that much eco-waste? Is it going to be possible to recycle it, or are we going to, and how are we going to produce it? Or are we going to damage the ecosystems that are already struggling to adapt to climate change? So my call to action is for planners to begin thinking about renewables and climate change, resilience to climate change, as equal priorities in urban development, accompanied by accountability and environmental standards that place a high priority on ecosystem protection and health. We've got to design resilience to climate change into renewables development, construction, and energy forecasts. We've got to establish environmentally sound standards for renewables life cycles to avoid additional impacts on ecosystems already struggling to adapt. So renewables, to finalize here, can reduce the risk of climate change through emissions reduction, and they can add resilience via decentralization of power generation, but we must work together to drive the development of resilient renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Deborah. I think I can't stress enough that we must not make the same failures of previous technologies, forget about the environmental impact of its production, but that we really learn from our mistakes. Our next speaker will be speaking about the question of a university as a societal testbed for sustainability. And the need to contextualize renewable energy in the terms of a sustainable energy system. He's an award-winning expert at the intersection of climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and sustainability. He's the Associate Provost on Sustainability and the Executive Director of the Sustainability Initiative at the UABC. Very warm welcome to Dr. John Robinson.
Thanks very much.
Whoops. Now you do it.
Thanks very much. I want to talk a little bit about the role that our sector can play. I think there's a huge opportunity, but also a huge obligation. Universities used to just get money because they were, good. That's no longer true, and we do have a real responsibility to engage much more actively, I think, in the sustainability transition. And it's a way of showing value that goes beyond graduating students and doing research. And I think the post-secondary sector in general is uniquely suited to play a role in the sustainability transition because of these 4 characteristics you can see on the screen. We're single owner occupiers of significant capital stock at a very interesting scale. UBC is 400 buildings on 400 hectares. That's a really interesting size. That is a scale that every city on the planet is struggling with right now, how to do things at the neighborhood scale. And we are one owner of that. Take 400 buildings downtown Vancouver, you've got thousands of decision makers. We actually have thousands too, but legally, it's one owner. We're one institution. We can act at that scale. That's really important. We're owner-occupiers. We live in what we build, so we actually have an inherent life cycle approach to that capital stock. We don't build and sell. We have a public mandate. That means we'll accept a longer payback. We'll take a 15-year payback on capital investment that has academic purpose. Nobody in the private sector can do that. We can do things the private sector cannot do in terms of sustainability. We teach and we do research. No one else has those 4 characteristics. So we almost uniquely can turn our whole campus into a sandbox where every single operational decision across the whole campus is a sustainability decision. It actually is a sustainability decision. We just don't always see it that way, but we can. And then we can say, let's attach research and teaching to all of it so that everything we do is a sustainability experiment. And let's try and push the envelope a little bit, learn the lessons, publish the results, because the private sector and government sector are somewhat reluctant to publish failure. If you want to find out the green buildings around the world that aren't performing very well, my little handy-dandy litmus test is go to the website, and if you can't find performance data, that's a bit of an indication that things may not be looking too good. We do publish. Everything is public. So we can fail, publish, learn from it, teach, study it, and work with partners in the community at an integrated campus scale. And then work with the city, whatever community we are. Imagine a world in which thousands of universities are doing this. We have science and technology institutes and liberal arts colleges. We have big, we have small, we have urban, we have rural. They're all acting as a kind of test bed. They're trying out this stuff and they're training students in the issues of how to implement and learn from sustainability. That's the role I think our sector should be playing. I like to make this case to as many people as I can because the more pressure on universities, the better. So if you have any way of applying pressure to the university sector, please do. We should be doing more of this. It's a huge strategic opportunity. It has recruitment implications, funding implications, partnership implications. But let me return so that's the pitch. We should be doing this big time. But let me return to the words in red here to make the link to the renewable energy a little more explicit and follow up on what we've just been hearing about the need to contextualize renewable energy. We used to think, and many textbooks still say, that the reason we want to switch to renewables from non-renewables is we run out of non-renewables and we don't run out of renewables. Of course, we've learned that's completely backwards. It's exactly the opposite. We don't have a supply problem of non-renewables. The world is awash in coal, for example, and increasingly in other fossil fuels as well. The problem is not peak supply. Actually, the problem on the non-renewable side is peak demand, a whole different issue. But we have too much of them. It would be great if they were supply limited, but they're not. So the problem isn't running out of non-renewables. The problem actually is running out of those renewables that are biologically based because we destroy the habitats. And so it's actually the renewables that are supply limited in important ways, not the non-renewables. The reason we want to make the switch, nevertheless, of course, is the renewables in general are way better from a sustainability point of view. It's the environmental impacts of burning oil that are the problem, not its physical scarcity. And so we need to make sure that that case is made. And I think the most exciting thing that's happened in my career, which actually I started doing this in '74, so even a little earlier. We've been arguing for decades about let's have the renewables come on stream, and never really believing that was going to happen at the speed at which it's required. That's happening. This incredible explosion. It's the most exciting thing in the energy field in the last 40 years, I think. But we better be aware that just because something is renewable doesn't make it good. The issue is it sustainable? And if we define sustainability, for example, as human activity that improves both environmental and human well-being, that's how we define it at UBC, then that's the question. Not all renewables are equally benign. Not all renewables are going to help us from a sustainability point of view. So we need to face the fact that the very success of renewable energy that we're celebrating in this conference, and some amazing sessions here about this, it's just incredible what's going on, have to face the same test. In the end, it has to be sustainable. It has to improve human and environmental well-being. So I think it's really important for the renewable energy sector in general to take on that challenge, as Deborah was saying, to really face up to the ecosystem issue. Renewables are better. We want more of them, but we want them in ways that will contribute to sustainability. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Jean. And our next speaker is looking into the question how to unlock the financial sources, the capital for this transformation that we've been discussing here. He's the co-founder and the CEO of the legendary Climate Bonds Initiative. It's an international NGO working to mobilize debt capital markets for climate solution. And he's also the director of the Network for Sustainable Financial Markets. Thanks very much for coming, and please give a warm applause to Sean Kidney.
Remember what this man said, because isn't it mad that we have universities full of earth science people who are suffering waves of depression? There's a whole body of literature now about the mental health problems of climate scientists, and guess why? Because the rest of us aren't listening to them. Because they've been saying the future is written in stone, and we are frothing around with the wastefulness of our lives. So no wonder they're getting depressed. So it's about time that there was a strong global movement of the universities that employ those people becoming the hotbeds, the seedbeds, the demonstration centres for what we have to do. It's about time. I want it next year, not in 4 years' time. Please, so fantastic the work you're doing. Now, will you please go back and tell the Sorbonne? Really. They are messing around and not taking this issue seriously. Let alone the University of Lyon, where you're holding your cities event in a couple of months' time. They have not taken this thing seriously. Guys, get your act together. So I'm here to talk about money. Vast waves of money floating around the world. I'm interested in mobilising the $100 trillion debt capital market. There's a lot of money in that. We think there is a chance here. We've been building a coalition around institutional investors to support financing of green growth development in cities and other places. That's the headline. We know about the problem, as Deborah has so eloquently said. Actually, what she didn't say, what she perhaps didn't make clear to you, is that it's pretty damn horrific, the future we're looking at. It's not my words. The incoming Chief Executive Officer of the International Energy Agency, they run the world's petroleum reserves, guys, says that we are on a road to catastrophe. We are tracking beautifully to a world to 6 to 7 degrees warming. Do you have any idea what this means? Well, I don't. So I asked John Schellenhuber, who's the German government's advisor on climate change, and he has a quote, which is the difference between 2 degrees warming and 4 degrees warming is civilization. Pretty damn crude, and that's actually a fairly senior climate scientist. So we are dicing with the future, not of the planet. It'll be fine, it'll get rid of us pests on the side. We're dicing with the future of our civilization, and more to the point, the lives of our kids and our grandchildren. I'm worried, And that's why there's a mental health problem amongst climate scientists. So let's take this incredibly seriously. Let's understand that we are talking about a rapid transition to a low carbon and climate resilient economy in double quick time, because we have left it so damned late. We have been rubbishing around for the last 20 years, and emissions have continued to increase at this incredible pace. Now, I'm not saying it's British Columbia's fault, don't get me wrong. I can point fingers later if you like. But globally, we are all in this together, so we are all responsible, even if you live in a hydro haven like Vancouver. So we all have to work on it. That's the first thing. And of course, it's cities. 82% of emissions. That's us, guys. We live in cities. We're the ones that are the problem. 70% of people by 2050 live in big cities. But there is good news. The first good news is that my friend at the IEA, the Fatih Birol, puts out a report each year called the World Energy Outlook, and he tells us what we can do. It's a fairly conservative estimate, but he says it's doable. It's about green infrastructure. Sure, a carbon price would be useful. Thank God British Columbia's got one. But I don't believe Harper's going to bring one in, and I don't believe Canada's getting one. And I certainly don't believe it's going to be a substantial price in the US. It is a long play. Don't put all your eggs in this basket, which is what we've done for 20 years. As Jeffrey Sachs says, we have wasted 20 years on lawyers. Try to work out an international scheme. It is the right thing to do in the long run. There are other options. The IEA talks about this as a green infrastructure revolution we need to have. Most of what we have to do is energy, is transport, is water, is buildings. Let's call buildings infrastructure for our purposes. It's cities. We know how to shift money in that sector. We've been doing it for 150 years. How do you think Vancouver was built? It wasn't built by free market forces. It was built by governments deciding what were policy priority infrastructure to help grow the city and develop it and deal with immediate problems like waste. That's infrastructure, and that's the sort of stuff we've got to do. We use government measures to shift capital to the right places. In British Columbia, there are regulatory requirements. There are leaseback guarantees. 2 British Columbia hospitals were built with a green bond last year, or being built at the moment. That is the way British Columbia builds infrastructure. There are different models in different countries. In the UK, we had to pull teeth to get a green investment bank funded with 3 billion sterling a few years ago. Last year, when there was an economic downturn, overnight, the Treasury of the UK found 50 billion sterling guarantee pool for housing developments. Why? Because it's an economic multiplier. They know how to, that's how they shift capital. So a real policy priority area was housing, not the environment. Now, they did it really stupidly, and this is where we can now start learning from the last 150 years. They provided full guarantees for social housing bonds to build buildings, AAA bonds. I can't find an investor in the world that wants a AAA bond. The only ones that are buying them, negative interest in Germany, are the ones that have to for fiduciary duty reasons. They want A-. Now, what the UK government could have done, well, first they could have said, if you're going to build houses funded by this 50 billion, please make them green. That's not a big ask, is it? No. Like, we could do that pretty easily. They didn't. 2, they could actually say, put it in a pot, make it a partial guarantee pool, so you get a partial support if you're an investor. You take some risk, not all the risk, and they could have got 250 billion of houses built for a $50 billion contribution by the state. That's how we do it. That's the opportunity. Now, I've got a whole toolkit of things like that. The other bit of the good news is that we have money in spades. We are awash in capital around the world, desperate for yield, who want that A- level yield, 2.5% to 4% returns. We can do it now. We can rebuild the world's infrastructure. We need to actually get serious on the risk bridging activities. That's rebiasing our existing support for infrastructure to be green. Every incentive in the world has to be rethought around green infrastructure, transport, and so on. We need to make sure our tax system is supportive of green. What's the biggest tax credit scheme in the US? Oil and gas, 100 years after it was needed. We haven't switched it over yet. Okay, the US is an odd problem, I accept that. But you actually have some of these in Canada too. And every country, as the OECD tells us, still has fossil fuel subsidies. We need to ensure the financial viability of the assets we build. One of the models that has not taken off around the world, as an example, is transport, land value capture. Transport needs to be reconceived as property play with mobility built in. That's what MTR, the Hong Kong Transport Authority, is doing in Shenzhen, building tower blocks on top of every every train station, and financing the capital expenditure through that. My institutional investor base, I have $34 trillion represented on my board, will buy those bonds then in those sort of circumstances. And finally, discovery. So the green bond market we've got is simply a discovery tool. Now, I've managed to wreck the thing. Here we go. So we have this market which is growing quickly globally. It's 37 billion going to 100 billion, we think, this year. This is a labelled market. This is about marketing the green projects and assets of cities. Cities like Ile-de-France, Paris, who has done a number of these bonds around social housing and energy and transport, or states like Massachusetts. The Treasurer of Massachusetts called the day they issued their first green bond the best bond issuing day of his life. In fact, the best day of his work life, because he got so many calls from citizens saying, that is fantastic, you're doing this. And they are getting an enormous amount of buyers from ordinary citizens. So they've lowered the cost of their capital. It is cheaper. A green bond is cheaper in Massachusetts than an ordinary bond of exactly the same credit characteristics. That's, of course, a clue to how we do the other thing, lower the cost of capital. So our opportunities in here, I keep doing this, excuse me, my opportunities in here are in a variety of areas. This PowerPoint will be available for you afterwards. It's in corporate bonds, it's in sovereign bonds, it's in municipal bonds, which is the fastest growing segment of this market. It involves all sorts of assets, not just energy, transport, water, and so on. That's the appetite we're getting around the world. It is fast growing. We have at the moment, as I said, $43 trillion, well 34 on my board, but $43 trillion of investors who came out of the UN Climate Summit and said, climate change is the biggest thing we have to do globally. Governments have to act. And by the way, if you create some investments we can invest in, we will invest. They went that extra step. And the insurance industry, representing $30 trillion, went one step further. They promised to multiply by 10 their climate investments by 2020. And what they're saying to me now, where are these cities with these deals? We can't find green bonds or climate bonds. Please come to us. That's the challenge. We're launching this program for cities around green city bonds with a bunch of coalition partners you can see at the moment. It's a marketing campaign for city green infrastructure. It has the goal of lowering the cost of capital selectively for green for a variety of measures. It's not just rich countries, it's also poor. Johannesburg, Beijing, those cities. We are looking for support from development finance initiatives. We have them, the World Bank, IFC, who will provide partial credit enhancement for green bonds if people meet the criteria. That's how we lower the cost of capital for green selectively over the brown. And we're setting up peer-to-peer support mechanisms. The Treasurer of Gothenburg, for example, has been mentoring the Treasurer of Portland to bring their green bond to market. That's one of the things we're doing under this campaign. We hope you will join us because the opportunity is there. Capital is cheaper than it has been in generations. There is an enormous amount of capital desperate for yield. We can do this, and we can do it quickly through cities. You want that? No.
Thanks, Sean. I think that was excellent and really a rush through this huge issue of unlocking the funding for the transformation. And I think you highlighted pretty well the role of cities. And that reminds me of the book that I read, and I had the chance to personally meet him, Dr. Benjamin Barber, who just wrote the book called If Mayors Ruled the World. And we just had this conversation this morning. In fact, the conclusion is they do. They do. And somebody who can speak about that to a certain extent is our next speaker, who is the councillor of the city of Nantes and the spokesperson of the United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG. Thanks for being with us in these 2 days, and a very warm welcome to Ronan Dantec.
Thank you, and thank you to invite me here for the opportunity to discover this beautiful city and region. I'm sorry, but I speak everywhere with a terrific French accent. I hope that you understand me. And my speech is to present maybe the framework of the negotiation in Paris in link with the role of cities, region, and non-state actors. I think it's important, and it's in link with your presentation, to understand that the most important thing is not Paris, it's the day before Paris. The role of Paris is to create a new dynamic. Because today, our principal risk, it is not climato-scepticism, this decrease, but climato-fatalism. The impression that it's not possible to tackle climate change and to stabilize climate. And the role in Paris, after the failure of Copenhagen, is to show that there is a credibility of a scenario 2 degrees below. And in Paris, we must show this dynamic. We must show first, of course, a deal between the national government, but maybe more, we must show the dynamic of non-state actors and role of business, cities, and other non-state actors. In Paris, French government understands very well this point and propose a deal with 4 pillars. First pillar, of course, it is the text. We discuss actually this text. It's a very long text with a lot of brackets. And for this text, the question is not legally binding or not legally binding agreement. It's more the quality of the text in some sentences about capacity building, access finance, and of course with networks of local government as ICLEI or UCLG, we follow precisely this text. It is the first pillar. Second pillar, it is the national contribution, voluntary national contributions. And we know at this moment that all this contribution can't permit to reach the 2 degrees below. If we have in Paris, with all the contribution, a 3 degrees below, I am optimistic. Maybe with Canadian contribution, the ambition increase. I'm not sure. I don't know what you think about Canadian contribution. One of the bad boys of the negotiation. But we know that this contribution, the aggregation of this contribution, will not sufficient to stabilize climate. It's just a first step. Third point, very important point, third pillar, it is finance. And you speak about this point. About finance, we must understand that we have not just one negotiation in this year, we have 2 negotiations. We have the negotiation of Sustainable Development Goal in New York in September, and we have the negotiation, the climate negotiation in Paris in December. If we have not a real deal about development with the SDG in New York, it's easy to imagine that we can't have an ambitious deal in Paris in December. And one very important point for development, of course, is finance. How we can finance the development of some countries in this world. And maybe the risk of climate change is a real chance to tackle poverty. Don't tweet climate change is a chance, after it's difficult to explain, but the risk of climate change is the opportunity to mobilize finance and to use this finance to, for the development, the sustainable development of some territories, cities of Africa, for example, to finance public transportation, to finance access of renewable energy. And I think it's a very important point, maybe the key point of this period, how we mobilize this money, direct money, green bonds, other finance for the development. It is maybe the most important point. And fourth point, and French government defends this point seriously, it is a positive agenda or agenda of the solutions. French government, as Laurent Fabius, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who leads the negotiation, understand very well that if we have just the national contribution was not enough. It's impossible to create a good story of Paris to create this dynamic. And it is for that the French government and Peruvian government too in Lima developed this idea that we need a fourth pillar with the pillar of the real action of non-state actors. And first, cities, local and subnational government, and business. Maybe it is one of the most important progress of this negotiation. With David Kahneman, you know David, who presided a long time UCL weekly, and I congratulate David for all this very, very important action. We are pushing during years and years this idea that it's important to help local government actors to do the job, And maybe Paris will be a real success for that. In Kyoto, in the Kyoto Protocol, there is absolutely nothing, no sentences, no words about role of local government. Now in Paris, it is one of the pillars of the negotiation. It's a real progress. And it is our responsibility today to enforce this point with some initiative. First, it's our capacity to speak with a common voice of local and subnational government. It is our tradition. We have a local climate roadmap which is endorsed by all the networks of local government. In the climate negotiation, local government is the only political level who have the capacity to speak with a common voice. It's very important in this negotiation. But now we do more, that we try to have common voice of all the non-state actors. In United Nations, there is 9 constituencies as business, local government, NGO, or trade union. And now we try to have common voice of all these constituencies. First, in January last year, we developed a common text to defend the idea to have a specific SDGs, Sustainable Goal, about urbanization and human settlement. And actually, it's a success. It's in the short list. In Ban Ki-moon Summit, we present a text, Catalyzing Action, who was endorsed by world networks of local and subnational government, but world networks of trade union, business, some big NGO, indigenous people of Africa, and women of India. It was the most large endorsed text of the history of climate negotiation. And it is very important to continue with this dynamic. In Lyon, in July, 1 and 2 of July, we have a meeting with all the representatives of non-state actors to deliver some message, to take commitments, and to deliver some proposal in link with the text about capacity building access. This dynamic is very important. Because at the end, we need, of course, a deal between national government, but we have the role to do the job. And our message at the end is very simple. Take the deal, find the deal, and we'll do the job together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronan. I think it was an excellent X-raying, quick X-raying of the huge dynamic around Paris. And it also gives us a feeling of the scale of the challenge related to this. So without further ado, I will come to our last speaker, who is just serving water to everyone, which is fantastic. I think we should give him applause for that. Thank you for saying.
All right. How many minutes do I have?
You have, as everyone, 7 minutes. But let me just quickly introduce you for 7.
Okay, no, don't introduce me. I don't have time. A lot of people know me already, and if you don't meet me, some in the. Okay, here we go. That's where I come from. I'm from Chile. I'm from the south, but I live in the northeast. Okay, that's our house, Stefan. This is why I won't talk history. I don't have time. I only got 7 minutes. My kids draw houses with solar because their dad and their mom built a house in front of a school, and everybody passes in front of it. And in winter, it's well designed. They still see the solar. We designed it the right way. And I teach in a university. I'm not as cool as John, but I try. And we bring the lectures into real life. We're trying to change things, minds, by doing. We're hoping soon to have a lot of this electric mobility. Deborah, you want low impact, so do I. If you're hearing this presentation, please stand up. Woodstock people are doing amazing stuff. I don't know if they're still in the room, but they're doing amazing. Woodstock Hydro in Ontario, it's doing electric mobility with solar, smart grids, the works. I don't see them, they're not standing up, but there they are. Please talk to the Woodstock people. They're awesome, awesome people. Yeah, you can clap, it's awesome, they're awesome. The 100% renewable people, they're on the house too, you know. Anna, where are you? Anna is awesome. Anna, you are awesome. We started doing our part for 100%, Ian, David Suzuki Foundation. They told us in 2004, no way you can phase out coal. Yes, we did. It's gone. See ya. Coal, bye-bye. 27 billion bucks, Sean, invested on renewables. Not shabby. Sorry. And people are working on this. We now got solar houses are being built, big solar farms. Sorry, Stefan, the biggest ones are not in Germany, they're in Ontario. Okay, sorry. I know you like sustainable and this scares you, Deborah, but this has to happen, you know, nuclear power plants, all toxic energy stuff, we gotta get rid of it. And here is a revolution in front of you, the co-ops in Ontario. You don't need to own a solar house, as lucky as I am. You can be part of a co-op. We started with the Toronto Renewable Energy Co-op, and now we got so many of them. Oxford Co-op right there in Woodstock. You guys are doing awesome. Zoo, powered by poo, under a feed-in tariff program. Solar share, it's happening, it's happening. Look at these happy faces. These are people that are putting solar made in Ontario. It's all about our communities doing amazing stuff, you know. This is the people making the solar systems in my house. 50 kilometers, 30 kilometers from my home. Everything was made right there in factories that look like this. Not in China, and they're not yet powered by renewables. I'm sorry to tell you because the nuclear lobby is powerful, but we're working on that. Barcelona, you still here, Manuel? Manuel Valdez from Barcelona. Manuel, awesome, awesome. This is you here, John Robinson in UBC, and your folks from SFU and the BCIT College of Technology. You came up with the energy oasis. We just put solar in front of it. Here you have your solar oasis in Burnaby. We say, we can do the same in Barcelona, can we not? And Manuel did it, you know. I say to Manuel, all you need is photovoltaics, fast charging stations. You already got the pretty little electric motorcycles. You got the electric vehicles. It's all about fleets. That's your fleet, John, in UBC. Electric fleet, my friend, yeah. And now look what Manuel did, you know. He put the garbage on the first floor, on the basement, where people don't see it, they didn't want it. Put it on the basement. There he is, first floor. It's for the little children and the old people to play bocce. That's the first floor of the solar oasis. And on the roof, the beautiful photovoltaic installations, the most beautiful with bifacial PV. That's the future, make it beautiful, you know. And there is him laughing on an electric car. They make electric cars in Barcelona. That's awesome. And look at the style, that style, you know. It is Barcelona. Okay, but can we do it in remote, low-income places? Most of the people on the planet are poor. So you gotta make it awesome for them and with them. What about if the wind does not work or the sun does not shine, then what? Well, let me show you what. Here we do it in El Hierro. Where is El Hierro? Find Morocco in the map, make a straight beeline into the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, you'll find the island of El Hierro. They say, we do not want to be part of the destruction of the planet anymore. We don't want to burn fossil fuel anymore. And let me just check the time.
You're fine, you're fine.
Okay, cool. So this is all from my friend Gonzalo Piernavieja from the Institute, the Technological Institute of the Canary Islands. He's part of 100% renewables. He hosted, when Stefan and Anna said, we want to bring European politicians to see the future, he said, come and see us. He can tell you about it. It's real simple. The island, they say, we put 5 wind turbines. When there is wind, we use the wind power, and we desalinate seawater, and then we build a top reservoir, no hydroelectric, nothing, no rivers destruction, nothing like that. Big swimming pool, 480,000 cubic meters of water. When the wind stops, you pass it to the bottom swimming pool through hydroelectric generators. The wind kicks back in, no problem. You put it through electric pumpers, up it goes to the top. What does it look like? This is what it looks like, upper reservoir. You just try to find a hole to make it cost effective. Nature did this courtesy of a volcano, an old volcano. Then you start digging, you line it up, you make the top reservoir, done, see ya. Put 2 pipes, connect the bottom ones, lower reservoir, do another hole, lining up, swimming pool, that's it. Build the hydro station, throw a party. Pumping station, do the same thing, throw another party. Wind farm, you ever seen how a wind farm gets built? Here it's built, boom, boom. Challenging to bring stuff in, goat herding, but they did it. And there you go, swimming, party, boom, victory. June 27th, that's it, done. Never celebrate to, always remember to party after you achieve something awesome. This place, El Hierro and the Instituto Tecnológico de las Canarias, are part of the best centers in the planet to study. UBC is one of them, okay? But there's another one. People of Freiburg, are you here? People of Freiburg? The best place to study solar. Folke Center in Denmark, the best place to study about wind power. And ourselves, modestly in Ontario, we got something called Codewright Center. Ontarians? Any Ontarians? Woo! That's where the bad boys come from, Sean. We're doing good stuff there, believe it or not. Also in Mexico, we have a concentrating solar facility, the best in the planet. You too can be part of the revolution, renewable energy evolution, revolution. That's what this is all about. And as my friend says, do well by doing good. So I close by saying, what does renewable energy require? In addition to all what my friends here said, we need to collaborate, ladies and gentlemen. That's what the revolution's all about. It's not about me, it's not about you, it's about us. And how do we do it? It's for everybody in the planet. There's no winners or losers. We're all in the spaceship together. We screw up the spaceship, we all screw up. So let's not do that. And make sure we do the projects always with the community in mind. The context dictates what technology, but remember to protect the community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jose. I think that was excellent and very, very encouraging and uplifting to see what's actually happening and how this transformation or this vendor or this transition is actually what's the pictures behind this, what we're discussing here. I think that was really good. Since I've been told to be extremely strict on the timing, I already have to apologize because we're 5 minutes delay, so I have to close this panel now. But I want to give you just one final thought from my experience. When people ask me about the Energiewende in Germany and the progress and where are we and the different statuses and so on and so forth, it helps me a lot to think of a quote of a gentleman called Mahatma Gandhi, who described 4 different levels. And I think it's, this quote was made in a complete different context, as we all know, but they describe perfectly, almost perfectly, the different levels that you have to undergo when you're transforming the energy sector. And that quote goes as follows. First, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then they fight you. And then you win. And I think that is exactly, we're just in the last phase. Thank you very much for this panel. Thank you to the speakers.